Am I wrong for leaving my own anniversary dinner and taking the cake with me? I, 38 female, have been married to my husband, Mark, 40 male, for 11 years. We are not a dramatic couple. No screaming matches, no door slamming, no Facebook posts that begin with "I usually don't do this, but." We have always prided ourselves on being steady, reliable. The kind of marriage people describe as solid, which I now realize is sometimes code for quietly swallowing things. This year was our 11th wedding anniversary. Not a milestone, but still something I cared about. I suggested dinner at a local restaurant we both like. Nothing fancy, just a reservation, a babysitter, and the radical idea of being adults who talk to each other without interruptions. Mark agreed, but said he had a small surprise planned. That should have made me happy. It didn't. Mark's surprises historically range from "I invited your parents without asking" to "I reorganized the garage during your birthday party." The day of the anniversary, I got home from work to find Mark stressed and glued to his phone. He told me the reservation was pushed back 30 minutes, which was annoying but manageable. Then he mentioned that his sister, Jen, 35 female, was stopping by for a minute. A minute, apparently, is a flexible unit of time. Jen arrived with her husband and their 2 kids. They sat down. Then my mother-in-law showed up just to say hi. Then my father-in-law. Suddenly my babysitter was watching 8 people hover around my dining table while I stood there in heels, holding my purse, wondering when my anniversary became a pop-up family gathering. I asked Mark quietly if the plan had changed. He said no, this was just before dinner. I asked why no one told me. He said he didn't think it mattered. Then Jen announced that since everyone was already here, we should just all go to dinner together. Mark laughed and said, "That could be fun." Something in me went very still. I reminded him that this was supposed to be our anniversary dinner. Jen said, "We're family, it's basically the same thing." My mother-in-law said, "You don't need privacy, you live together." I looked at Mark. He didn't look back. I paid the babysitter and she left. We went to the restaurant as a group of 9. The reservation, shockingly, could not accommodate that many people, so we were split across 2 tables. I sat next to my father-in-law and daughter, while Mark sat across the room laughing with his sister. The waiter asked if we were celebrating anything. Mark shouted from the other table, "Our anniversary," and everyone clapped. I smiled like a person being held hostage by politeness. The conversation was loud and chaotic. The kids spilled drinks. Jen talked about a work conflict. My mother-in-law complained about her neighbor. At no point did Mark and I have a conversation longer than 10 seconds. Halfway through the meal, a cake arrived. A large cake. White frosting. Gold lettering that said, "Happy Anniversary Mark and Claire." My name was spelled wrong. Everyone cheered again. Mark stood up and gave a speech about how marriage is about community and how lucky he was to have so much family support. He did not mention me once. I excused myself to the bathroom and cried in a stall for several minutes. When I came back, the cake had been cut. I had not had a slice. That was the moment something in me snapped. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just cleanly. I walked back to the table, picked up the remaining half of the cake box, and said, "I'm going home." Mark laughed, thinking I was joking. I said I wasn't. I told him this was not what we agreed to, that I felt invisible, and that I didn't want to spend my anniversary watching him host a family reunion. My mother-in-law said I was being sensitive. Jen said I was ruining the night. Mark pulled me aside and said I was embarrassing him. I told him I had already felt embarrassed for 2 hours. I paid for my portion of the meal, took our daughter and the cake, and left. I went home, took off my heels, and ate frosting straight from the box on the couch after putting the baby to bed. Mark came home an hour later furious. He said I humiliated him, that I overreacted, and that normal couples don't storm out over small stuff. He asked why I couldn't just let one night go. I told him this wasn't one night. This was 11 years of my needs being treated as optional if someone else wanted something louder. He said I was rewriting history. He said I never said I wanted it to be just us. I reminded him I literally made the reservation and hired a babysitter. He said the cake was supposed to be the surprise. The next day, his family started texting me. Some said they were confused. Others said I owed Mark an apology. Jen said I made her kids feel bad by leaving. My mother-in-law said she raised Mark better than this kind of drama. I told Mark I needed space. He stayed with a friend for a few days. Now we're in this strange limbo. Mark says he understands why I was upset, but still thinks I handled it wrong. I think the fact that he's more upset about the scene than about how lonely I felt is the real problem. So, am I wrong for leaving my own anniversary dinner and taking the cake with me, or was that the only part of the night that actually belonged to me? Update: am I wrong for leaving my own anniversary dinner and taking the cake with me? Hi everyone. I didn't expect my original post to get so much attention, but reading the comments felt like someone finally turning on a light in a room I'd been sitting in for years. A lot has happened since then, so here's the update. After I posted, Mark and I agreed to actually talk. Not a rushed end of day, we're both tired, but let's pretend this is communication talk. We scheduled time. Babysitter. Phones off. Just us. The irony was not lost on me. I started by asking him a simple question. Why did it never occur to him to ask me before turning our anniversary into a family event? He said, very honestly, I thought you'd be fine with it. When I asked why, he admitted that I usually am. I usually adapt. I usually don't make a fuss. I usually smooth things over. Hearing him say it out loud felt like pressing on a bruise I didn't know I had. I told him that the dinner wasn't the real issue. The issue was that my wants only seemed to matter if they didn't inconvenience anyone else. I told him how often I feel like the supporting character in my own life. I cried. He looked stunned. Not defensive. Not angry. Genuinely surprised. That part hurt more than if he'd argued. He said he never meant to make me feel invisible, and I believe him. But intention doesn't mop up impact. When I asked him why he gave a speech about marriage without mentioning me, he went quiet. Then he said he was nervous and defaulted into host mode. I asked why he was more comfortable hosting his family than being present with his wife. He didn't have an answer. We also talked about his family. He admitted that he avoids conflict with them at all costs, even if that means pushing me into discomfort instead. He said he didn't realize how often I absorbed that discomfort for him. I told him I didn't realize it either until I walked out of a restaurant holding half a cake like a divorced cartoon character. Here's the part people might be waiting for. We didn't magically fix everything. What we did do was agree to couples counseling. Not as a punishment. Not as a last resort. As maintenance we should have done years ago. We've had 2 sessions so far, and in the second one, Mark said something that stuck with me. He said, I think I thought being a good husband meant keeping everyone happy. I didn't realize that included you. That sentence landed like a dropped plate. As for his family, there were more conversations. Some awkward ones. Jen apologized for minimizing my feelings, though she still framed it as not realizing how serious I was. My mother-in-law has not apologized, but she has noticeably stopped commenting. I'll take neutrality as progress. The cake has become a weird symbol. Mark replaced it. Same bakery. Correct spelling this time. He didn't present it with a speech or a crowd. He just put it on the counter and said, this one is actually for you. I cried again. I cry a lot lately, but it feels productive, like emotional spring cleaning. We're still together. We're still figuring things out. I'm practicing saying what I want before I reach a breaking point. Mark is practicing listening without assuming I'll just adjust. I don't regret leaving that dinner. I don't regret taking the cake. That night forced a conversation we'd been postponing for a decade. So no, I don't think I was the asshole. I think I was just finally loud enough to hear myself.